let's pivot to some college football action. The second college football playoff rankings came out on Tuesday night. The top five stayed the same of Ohio State, Indiana, Texas A&M, Alabama, and Georgia. Texas Tech jumped up to sixth following their win against BYU. And then rounding out the top 10 is Ole Miss, Oregon, Notre Dame, and Texas. Oklahoma, BYU, Utah, Vanderbilt, and Miami are 11 through 15. Georgia Tech, USC, Michigan, Virginia, who lost a game, and then Louisville, who lost as well, are 16 through 20. So rough week for the ACC. And then 21 through 25, rounding out the top 25, we have Iowa, Pittsburgh, Tennessee, who jumps in to the top 25. Or actually, they might have been 25 to begin with. I can't remember. And then South Florida and Cincinnati. So, Braden, before we dive too deep into, our revised rankings and playoff predictions and whatnot, looking at what this bracket would look like, or I guess I should say what the top 25 looks like right now. Who feels too high and who looks too low?
Yeah, I've got one team that feels too high, one that feels too low, and one ranking I'm just a little bit surprised about in general. So the team I think is too high. I guess it's kind of the ACC as a whole, but especially Virginia. From my personal rankings, I've got a lot of the ACC teams 1 to 2 spots lower than where they actually are. Like I've got Miami at 17, Georgia Tech at 18, Louisville at 19, and Pitt at 23. Those are all like very marginal differences. They're at least in the same range. But I don't understand why Virginia is ranked right now. Sure, they're 8-2, but other than their win over Louisville, they have one win over a Power Four team with a winning record. Their other wins are Coastal Carolina, who is having kind of a good second half of the season in the Sun Belt, FCS William and Mary, 3-7 Stanford, 4-5 Florida State, 4-5 Washington State by 2 points, 4-5 North Carolina by 1 point in overtime, and 6-4 Cal. They have lost to 5-4 North Carolina State, who is 2-3 in ACC play, technically 3-3 because that game against Virginia was a non-conference game for whatever reason, and 6-3 Wake Forest, who is 3-3 in ACC play. Neither of those teams are particularly good, despite having winning records. Good for Virginia for having their best season in nearly a decade, but the eye test shows a much different story than their win total right now. For my team, I think is too low. I'm going to go with USC here. I had them ranked 11th in my personal rankings after this week, and I think they're, 18 in the CFP poll?
Yeah, I think it was 17. Yeah, 17.
Okay. I think Michigan's 18. I was looking at their matchup.
Yep.
So their losses are to Notre Dame, who is 9th in the CFP rankings, and Illinois on the road. Both of those are on the road, who is 6-3. And Illinois' losses are to the top two teams in the country and to Washington, who, other than inexplicably losing to Wisconsin last Saturday, was also ranked going into the week. Both of Illinois' losses, or sorry, not both of Illinois' losses, both of USC's losses, road games, tough Big Ten environments. Or I guess Notre Dame's not a Big Ten environment, but you get what I'm saying. USC has also dominated number 18 Michigan, beaten Nebraska on the road during their blackout game. And yes, Dylan Raiola did get hurt during that game, but I think USC was still winning at the time Raiola got injured. And they also dominated Northwestern. That's their last 3 games since playing or I guess 3 of their last 4 games other than playing Notre Dame. Every win USC has had has been at least by 14 points, besides its 4-point win against Nebraska. And it's been competitive in its 2 losses. It hasn't had the brakes beaten off of it, ranking them 8 spots below Notre Dame, who is ranked 9th in large part because of their quality losses rather than their wins, is just asinine to me. And then one quick thing that surprised me a little bit. I don't have too much to touch on with Iowa, but I was a little bit surprised they only moved down 1 spot. I figured, even though they lose in a close game to Oregon, they were leading with under 10 seconds to go. I thought the committee would probably unrank them at 6-3, but they only fell 1 spot. I think that's relatively fair. So kudos to the committee for at least recognizing Iowa being able to hang in that game the entire way.
Yeah, and 2 of those 3 teams you mentioned, USC and Iowa, are going to play this weekend. We'll touch on that game here shortly. But yeah, I was going to touch on Virginia as well. They're unranked in our BS poll, which is up on our social media. But to play a little bit of devil's advocate for Virginia, it was 16-9. Their starting quarterback got hurt pretty early in the game. They outperformed Wake Forest for the vast majority of it. They held them to just barely over 200 yards of offense. And their backup quarterback for Virginia, I can't remember his name, but lost 2 fumbles in there. So I think if their starting quarterback was healthy, they'd probably win that game. And maybe the committee factored that in a little bit as well. But either way, I mean, this is a team that's been begging to lose for the vast majority of the season. So I think having them inside the top 20 is still a little bit too high. I don't really have a whole lot to touch on other than I think there was a pretty obvious snub, in my opinion, and that is James Madison. They are 8-1. They have won 7 straight games. Their one loss was at Louisville on September 5th. Louisville, who is ranked 20th in the country right now, they lost 28-14. That was a tie game going into the fourth quarter. Since then, they have won 7 straight by an average of 20 points per game. Their offense is averaging 500 yards per game over the last month. And for a one-loss team that's undefeated in the Sun Belt, I'm kind of surprised that they're ranked behind in a 2-loss USF team.
Yeah, I think with James Madison, they're ranked in both of our rankings. They're ranked in the BS poll, which is the only poll that really matters. You can find that on our social media as well. But I think the difference between them and South Florida is the quality wins versus the quality losses. James Madison, they don't really have any great wins this year. Yeah, they beaten up on the Sun Belt, but it's also the Sun Belt. And I think if they go 12-1, they're in a position to make the playoff necessarily. But I don't think if they have one more loss, they're officially eliminated for sure. With South Florida, I think that win over Florida, as much as it pains me to say it, is carrying too much weight right now because really South Florida's other wins aren't phenomenal either. They lost to Memphis as well. So personally, I think both those teams are kind of in the same stratosphere, I would say, towards the low end of the top 25. But if you're going to rank one, I feel like you have to rank both.
And that's exactly the last thing I was going to say because Cincinnati is currently the 25th team in the country. They just lost by 31 points to Utah, and albeit Utah's a great team. But to lose by 31 points and still be ranked, I think is a little bit dumb if I'm just putting it bluntly. So yeah, I would have both of those teams in over Cincinnati for sure. But I digress. I'm going to touch on a little bit a scenario in which 2 group of 5 teams could possibly get into the playoff later. But let's move on over to the current projected college football playoff bracket. Remember, the top 5 conference champions get automatic bids. So the top 4 seeds, as we mentioned, Ohio State, Indiana, Texas A&M, Alabama, they all get buys. The 5-12 matchup would be USF going to Georgia. The winner would then play Alabama. The 6-11 matchup would be Miami, who is the projected, and I use quotes for projected, ACC champ because they have 2 conference losses and as of right now are not sniffing the ACC championship game. They're 15th in the college football playoff rankings. They would play at number 6 Texas Tech, who would then play Texas A&M, the winner of that game. The 7-10 matchup would be number 10 Texas at number 7 Ole Miss. The winner would play Indiana. And the 8-9 matchup is number 9 Notre Dame at number 8 Oregon, who would play Ohio State, whoever wins that one. Braden, what stands out to you the most from this projected bracket?
Yeah, it's just got to be the number of SEC and Big Ten teams in this bracket. You have 5 SEC teams. I think there was 4 that made it last year. You have 4 Big Ten teams, I think, right? 3 Big Ten teams. I can't count.
Yep.
And the highest ranked non-Big Ten or SEC team is 9th ranked Notre Dame. And you have 10th ranked Texas right after that. It's pretty clear that there are 2 conferences that the committee is in on this year, and they are certainly not the ACC or any group of 5 conferences. So I think we're going to see a very top-heavy Big Ten, or I guess Texas Tech is number 11, right? No, they're number 6.
They're 6, yeah.
I wrote Texas on there for whatever reason in my notes. So disregard my point previously, but still the amount of SEC teams and Big Ten teams in this ranking, it's crazy. I think it's going to be fun to see how things play out down the stretch.
Well, and I think, too, you could argue that, had there not been the top 4 seedings last year of conference champions, I think the top 4 to 5 teams would have probably all been Big Ten or SEC, and that's kind of what it is this year. You mentioned the top 5 teams, all Big Ten or SEC, Texas Tech in there at 6, but then you've got the 7-10 matchup would be straight SEC, and then Oregon at 8, Notre Dame at 9. So it's very SEC Big Ten heavy for sure. The couple things I want to point on. First, as an Alabama fan, I don't want to play Georgia again, and I sure as hell don't want to play USF. Last year when Alabama and USF played, it was a 1-point game going into the fourth quarter. Alabama then pulled away, but for 45 minutes, it was just pure agony. And then 2 years ago, aka the Tyler Buckner game, which I would love to choose to forget about, Alabama was only up 7 points going into the fourth. They won by 14, but it was very ugly. So that frightens me greatly. The main thing, though, that I want to touch on is that I think it's worth noting that there is definitely a world and a chance where we have an ACC-less playoff. Miami is very likely not going to make it if they don't win the ACC, which they have 2 conference losses, as I mentioned. And there are 5 ACC teams that have only 1 conference loss. So they would need an at-large bid, which I don't currently see happening. The top-ranked teams in the ACC standings, which is Georgia Tech, Virginia, and Pitt, all have slip-up games left in conference play. The point I'm trying to make here is that 4-loss Duke could win the ACC, and if that's the case, the winner of the American Conference, which is projected to be USF at the moment, would make it over them. I mentioned James Madison as a team that I thought got snubbed. I would think if they're a 1-loss team, they would get in over Duke. So I'm not saying it's going to happen, but just keep it in mind. There's still a lot of football left to be played, and there's a lot that can happen in November and early December that can cause some chaos. But with that out of the way, we have our revised college football playoff predictions. We, of course, had our preseason ones that did not bode well. We both had Clemson as our national champions. That is not in play. I had Penn State as my 1 seed. That is not in play. So let's redeem ourselves a little bit, Braden, and I'll let you start us off with your top 4 seeds.
Yeah, well, I had Penn State in my national championship game too, so yeah,
Ooh.
it was a big swing and a miss from us. My streak of consecutive national champion picks in the preseason will die at 2 unless Clemson somehow finds a way to win the ACC with 3 conference losses and like 4 losses overall. Are
Yeah,
they 4-5 right now, or are they
they're
5?
4-5.
Okay, so maybe that's out the window. But my predictions for the rest of the way, I've got Ohio State as the number 1 seed. Oh, before I go into my rankings, I went out and picked every single game the rest of the year, and then made like mock rankings off of that. So Ohio State is my 1 seed. Georgia's my 2 seed. Those are the Big Ten and SEC champs. Indiana as my 3 seed, and Texas A&M as the 4 seed. Beyond that, I've got Ole Miss as the 5 seed. They're the SEC runner-up for me, based on a 4-way tie with Georgia, Texas A&M, and Alabama. And this assumes that the committee sticks with the not punishing teams for losing their conference championships game thing, like we saw with SMU last year. Notre Dame is my 6th seed. Oregon is my 7 seed. 8 seed is Texas Tech as my Big 12 champ. I've got Alabama as the 9 seed. I have a projected loss to Auburn here, which is my big upset the rest of the way. That will knock them out of the SEC championship game based on that weird tiebreaker scenario. I've got Vanderbilt as my 10 seed. I think they win against Tennessee in rivalry week, which gets them into the playoff. I've got Georgia Tech as the 11 seed and my ACC champ. They are almost certainly going to be ranked lower than 11th in the final CFP poll based on projected wins against Boston College, Pitt, and Duke in the ACC championship game, and a loss to Georgia to end the regular season. And I've got Tulane as my 12 seed and group of 5 representative. I have them beating North Texas in the American Championship game. They would get in at 11-2 over a 12-1 James Madison based on strength of schedule. Would likely be ranked in the low 20s, talking like 22, 23, 24, etc. in the poll. I think that the committee would take an 11-2 Georgia Tech over a 12-1 James Madison, again, based on that kind of strength of schedule and the quality wins metric. Really, anything to avoid putting 2 group of 5 teams in the playoff, the committee would probably do. Some notable teams I excluded real quick before we get into our to your bracket and then into our picks. I excluded Texas based on a projected loss to Oklahoma. To Georgia. I excluded Oklahoma based on a projected loss to Alabama. I excluded Miami based on a projected loss to Pitt. Utah and Cincinnati both miss at 10-2 and 10-3 in favor of a 10-2 Vanderbilt. And then I have South Florida projected to lose to Navy this week, which we'll touch on more later, which will eliminate them from the group of 5 conversation.
Well, yeah, I did the same thing as you did with my hypothetical game predictions. I like the point you made about the SEC and Big Ten and the power conference runner-ups not being punished like SMU was last year. Um, as far as your Alabama Auburn thing goes, I have to touch on that. I think that's spot on. I am terrified for that game. Kalen DeBoer is notorious for winning the big games and losing on the road against the middle of the pack ones, let alone Auburn, which is going to be a very hostile environment. So I think that is definitely possible. But my top 4, I have Ohio State, Texas A&M, Indiana, and Alabama. My 5 through 12, I have Georgia, Texas Tech at 7, or sorry, at 6, Ole Miss at 7, Oregon at 8, Notre Dame 9, Texas 10. I have Virginia winning the ACC. I'm not proud of that, but I'm throwing a little bit of chaos there. And then USF in as my group of 5 bid. They have that Navy game coming up, which we'll touch on later here. UAB and Rice. So if they went out, they're in with how the rankings currently are shaping up. But with that out of the way, oh, sorry, a couple teams that I left out. Utah was technically my 11 seed, but being that the ACC and Group of 5 team were in above them, they were the first team out, and then Vanderbilt was right there as well. Oklahoma in there as well. So a couple teams that did not make it for me. But with that out of the way, Braden, how are your first round matchups shaping up?
In the first round, I've got Ole Miss knocking off Tulane for the second time this year. They absolutely beat the doors off of them when they met in I think week 4 or week 3,
Yeah.
sometime in mid to late September. Notre Dame beat Georgia Tech in the 6-11 matchup. Oregon will knock off Vanderbilt, and I've got Alabama winning at Texas Tech as the only lower seed to win in the first round.
Love to hear that. I have number 5 Georgia taking care of number 12 USF. I have Texas Tech taking care of Virginia. I don't think that game would be close at all. I think that'd be a pretty miserable game to watch, especially as a Virginia fan. I have Texas upsetting number 7 Ole Miss. I think that'd be a great game. And same thing with me. That's the only lower seed that I have winning in the first round. And then I have number 8 Oregon taking care of business against number 9 Notre Dame. With that, Braden, your quarterfinal matchups.
In my quarterfinals, I have number 9 Alabama upsetting number 1 Ohio State. I have Georgia as the 2 seed, I believe. Yep, 2 seed beating 7 seed Oregon. 3 seed Indiana gets revenge on 6 seed Notre Dame. Revenge for last year's quarterfinals, or first round rather. And then I have 4 seed Texas A&M knocking off 5th seeded Ole Miss.
I have number 1 Ohio State and number 8 Oregon, which, funny enough, would be a rematch of last year's Rose Bowl with the seeds flipped. I do have Ohio State winning that one, so it would not be a repeat of the upset. Number 2 Texas A&M and number 10 Texas. I've got Texas A&M, which would be a rematch of the rivalry week game. Number 3 Indiana and number 6 Texas Tech. This is my upset. I'm calling Texas Tech. I am super bullish on the Red Raiders. I do not think they're being talked about enough. So I will take them to upset Indiana, one of the best teams in the country this year. And then number 4 Alabama and number 5 Georgia. I'm taking Georgia in that one. Maybe it's a little bit of hedging on my part, but it's very hard to beat a team twice, let alone Georgia. So I will take the Dogs to knock off Alabama in that one. And then Braden, I'll send it back your way for your semifinal matchups.
Yeah, I've got a very SEC heavy semifinals. I've got 9th seeded Alabama knocking off number 4 seed Texas A&M. This would be probably the best game of the entire postseason in my mind. And then I've got 3 seeded Indiana knocking off 2 seeded Georgia. I just believe in Kurt Signetti and this Indiana team. I'm a huge believer in Fernando Mendoza. Elijah Surratt and Omar Cooper are a great wide receiver duo. I think they could pull off the upset there. Even if they're the higher seed, or I guess they're the 3 seed my bracket versus 2 seeded Georgia, I think they'd still be like probably 5 to 7 point underdog. So it would be an upset by the betting lines.
Well, and we didn't talk about that Indiana Penn State game at all last week, as far as predictions go. But before I go to my semifinal pick, I just want to say I think every great team needs a game like what Indiana had against Penn State. Penn State, say what you want about them, say anything you want about the year they're having. It's not good, But this, as far as roster construction goes, is probably one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the Big Ten. And so to go to their place and squeak out a win like that, I think is going to be huge for Indiana. With that said, I do have them losing to Texas, or no, I had them losing to Texas Tech in my quarterfinals. So never mind. That was a reiteration. But my semifinal matchups, I have number 1 Ohio State taking on number 5 Georgia. I'm going to take Ohio State. I think that would be a fantastic game, but I think Ohio State's just a slightly better team this year. And then Texas A&M as my 2 seed versus number 6 Texas Tech. Battle of the Texas teams. I'm taking Texas Tech. The state of Texas in this hypothetical playoff predictions would be rolling in money from these playoffs and media revenue. But I'm telling you, this Texas Tech Red Raiders team is not getting the coverage that they deserve. They just beat the shit out of BYU last weekend. I think it was like 29-7. That game could have very easily been 35-7 or 40-7, something like that. So this Red Raiders team is legit. So I'm going to take them to go to the Natty. And then Braden, who do you have winning it all?
Yeah, first, I'm going to go on a side tangent here and talk about how the entire Mormon religion hated me last week for saying BYU was sort of fraudulent. I didn't even say they were a bad team. I just said they were due to lose a game as 10.5 point underdogs to a great Texas Tech team. And our comments were just flooded with people saying, like, oh, where's our loss? Oh, this and that. Like, oh, it wasn't down to the wire. Shut up. I mean, even after the game, somebody goes and comments on our video saying, like, now do Indiana versus Penn State. And I talk about, exactly what you said. It's tough to win in Happy Valley, even though the team isn't as good as it is in years past. And the dude comes back and talks about, like, oh, Indiana's played nobody. Their strength of schedule is virtually identical. I looked it up. BYU is 28th in strength of schedule. Indiana is 33rd so far. There is almost no difference between them. So with that side tangent over, I'm picking Indiana to beat Alabama and to win the national championship.
And yeah, just going back to the BYU thing, we had a successful hate watch over the weekend. Um, but yeah, if you want to get in our TikTok comments, you want to talk some shit to us, we are on TikTok, so
We're
check
always
us
happy to
out there.
respond to.
Yeah, we are very active. We will respond. So if you disagree with us on something, let us know. But my national championship, number 1 Ohio State versus number 6 Texas Tech. As much as I want to continue the Texas Tech Cinderella story, I'm taking Ohio State. It's boring. They're the number 1 team in the country, but I have seen nothing that makes me want to predict anyone to knock them off. So for the time being, they are my national champion team. And in our hypothetical revised playoff predictions, we both have the Big Ten getting it done for the 3rd season in a row. So shout out to the Big Ten for that.